I have a few videos about the trauma bond, and in today's video we're kind of going to take it back to the basics and talk about what is the trauma bond and 7 signs that you might be in a trauma bond. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Calm and Ego community. My name is Christina, and on this channel we talk about emotional abuse, its connection with spirituality, and we attempt to answer the question, where do we go from here? So if that all sounds good, like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you'll be notified when I post new videos. So what is trauma bonding? Now, I get the question every once in a while. I'll have somebody ask, what is the difference between the trauma bond and Stockholm syndrome? And the answer, you'll find it varies depending on who you ask. The truth is they are very similar, so similar in fact that you could almost use them interchangeably. The reason why I do not is because I do see a difference in the connotation, in the way those words sound and feel to me. So we'll get to that, but first I really want to explain what the trauma bond is. The trauma bond refers to a loyalty to a person who has repeatedly hurt you. And this person might be a narcissist, this person might be a sociopath, but it's important to remember that that person's diagnosis doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they would be diagnosed with anything. This is about you and your reaction to the way you've been treated. And so if you're finding yourself in a relationship that might be abusive, that other people are labeling as abusive, maybe you're not quite there yet, and you're kind of wondering what's going on. Why do I feel so tethered to this person who continually hurts me? Why do I feel like there's so much hope, even if I look at history and I see that it just keeps repeating itself and nothing changes? Why do I feel that sense of hope? Am I trauma bonded? So there are 7 signs that you might be trauma bonded. And I have another video with 6 signs that you might still be trauma bonded. So that video is more about after you've gotten out of the relationship and yet you still feel like you're connected to that person. And this can happen for a very long time after you're out of a relationship with a narcissist or another emotionally abusive person. So I think it's helpful to identify once you're out if you're still feeling like you're tied to that person in some way. So that's a separate video. This video is about how you might feel when you're in the relationship with a narcissist or another emotionally abusive person. So we're going to cover 7 signs that you might be trauma bonded. So the first sign might be what brought you here, that the other person continually hurts you in the same way or a similar way, but yet you keep thinking that there's hope. Maybe they act a certain way when you hang out with your friends or family. You try to explain to them that it's hurtful when they do that. Or maybe they make comments about your appearance or a personality quirk. Whatever it is, they're making you feel bad and you're telling them they're making you feel bad, but yet they keep doing the same thing over and over again. They might even say that they're sorry for doing it when they do it, when they're caught doing it, but then they do it again and again. So you might think that this person has no control, right? But we all do. We all know that if we do something that hurts somebody and they tell us, we have a choice. We have a choice about whether we're going to do that thing again. And none of us are perfect, and maybe we slip up sometimes too. But what we're talking about here are consistent patterns. If someone is hurting you and you tell them that this specific thing you're doing is hurting me, and they keep doing it, they're doing it with some level of intention. And if you're having trouble seeing that, and if you're having trouble getting out of this relationship, that might be a sign that you are trauma bonded to this person. So the second sign that you might be in a trauma bond is actually external. It's when you talk about this relationship, when you talk about some of the bad things that have happened, you notice that consistently other people are more appalled and might even seem more offended than you are. And that's because you kind of glaze over the bad things that are happening. And you've really gotten used to the way this person treats you. You might even make excuses for the person. Oh, that's just how he is, or she's always like that. But when you tell someone else, they see it from a fresh perspective, and it's really not good. And I know when I was in this situation, sometimes even when I would say things aloud, I would hear it back myself. So you may be in that situation too. But until you start talking about it, you may not realize how bad and how hurtful it really is. So the third sign that you might be trauma bonded is you feel stuck in a negative loop that you have no control over. So this relationship, I often call it like a hamster wheel. You're stuck on a hamster wheel, or it's like a roller coaster ride that you can't get off of. There's all these ups and downs, and it just keeps going. And you want it to level out. That's all you're after. You just want it to level out, but it won't. You cannot make it level out. You can't control it, and you can't get off. So the fourth sign that you might be trauma bonded is that you're spending a lot of your own personal time and energy trying to find ways for this person to see the light. And you're probably also spending a lot of time trying to convince this person to change. And you think up new ways to explain it, to explain what you think is so obvious, but they just don't seem to get it. Or if they do get it, it's only for a short time. They'll get it temporarily, and then they'll just go back to their old ways. But this sign that you're in the trauma bond is all about how much time you're spending on this. If this is taking up a good chunk of your life, there's a good chance that you might be trauma bonded to this person, because this sign points to the very real feeling that you're just hitting your head up against a wall. You're trying so hard to get this person to change, and yet you keep trying and trying, and you have to keep trying if you want to stay in this relationship, because you have to try and make it something that can work for you. But the thing is, it's not going to work for you if this person is emotionally abusive. So the fifth sign is directly related. It is a result of the fourth sign. The fourth sign is that you're spending a lot of your time and energy trying to think up new ways to get through to this person. The fifth sign is that you keep having the same argument over and over. And in this argument, you're trying to express your feelings and what's happening to you in this relationship, how this person and how this relationship and their actions is hurting you. And you keep having that same argument over and over. Maybe it starts in a different way, but it ends up in the same place. And especially if you're dealing with a narcissist, you're gonna feel like this argument is just on a never-ending cycle. This argument isn't going to end until you walk away from it, because they're not gonna let you win, and they end up using infuriating techniques like word salad to confuse you and to get you away from the point that you're trying to make. Because the truth is, this person that you're talking to probably isn't as dense as it seems in the moment. What you're explaining is probably a very simple concept that they could get if they wanted to, but they don't want to, because then they would have to accept that they were doing something wrong, that they were doing something that was hurtful and doing something that needed to be changed. If they accepted it, they would have to change their behavior, and that's not something they're willing to do. So you end up spinning your wheels. If you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, whether it's a partner or family member, coworker, think about how much of your time is spent in these circular arguments. How much of your relationship, if you made a pie chart of it, how much of your relationship would be taken up with these circular arguments? It would be a lot. So the sixth sign that you're trauma bonded is that you have already tried to detach from this person in some way, and you've been unsuccessful. So maybe if you're dealing with a narcissist, maybe they discarded you and you ended up going back. When they discarded you, you said, that's it, I'm done. I'm so glad that they ended this, because this is just the worst thing for me. But then when they came back, you let them in. Or maybe you decided that you've had enough. I can't take this anymore. This relationship is draining me. It's taking me so far away from myself and who I need to be that I just don't want to do it anymore. But then you end up taking them back. So the seventh sign that you might be trauma bonded is whenever you separate from this person, you can't stop thinking about how to get back with them. You don't feel whole unless you're with this person. You feel like you've had some sort of spiritual connection with this person. You feel like a part of you is missing when you're not together. So that's why it's often so successful when they end up coming back after a discard to hoover you back in. If you're trauma bonded, you're not necessarily thinking logically about this situation. The trauma bond itself prevents you from that logical thought that you might apply to any other situation in your life. And it prevents you from having that logical thought that other people are having about your relationship. So if you've ever known someone else who's been trauma bonded and who's been going back to an emotionally abusive person, or maybe even a physically abusive person, and you see it so clearly that they just need to get out, just stop doing what you're doing, you can apply the logic because you're not the one who's in the trauma bond. But when you are in the trauma bond, logic becomes very, very difficult. Recognizing the trauma bond and understanding that that's why, it's actually something that's happening in your brain that is preventing you from seeing what's really going on here. It's keeping you tied to this person in your life who's abusive. It's keeping you in these cycles, on the hamster wheel, on that roller coaster you can't get off. That there's an actual physical reason for it. That was so incredibly, incredibly helpful to me. I can't tell you where it would be if I didn't learn about the trauma bond. But now bringing it back to the idea of the trauma bond versus Stockholm syndrome. So if somebody had told me early on that I was experiencing Stockholm syndrome, I wouldn't have accepted it. There's no way. I mean, I don't know if I would have laughed or just been completely put off by it, but I would not have accepted it. Because anytime I've ever heard Stockholm syndrome before I got into any of this, before I started learning about all of this, it was really in like kidnapping situations, holding somebody physically captive. And that just didn't seem to apply to what I was going through. When you're first ready to acknowledge that what you've been through is actually emotional abuse, it's really difficult because we try so hard to protect ourselves from that. We try so hard to push that away because of the trauma bond, because we feel so tethered to this person, that acknowledging abuse would push us away from that person. So it's so difficult. And I have a video on all the reasons why it's so difficult to acknowledge abuse. That for me personally, the term trauma bond was a little bit more specific. It was a little bit less about being held in physical captivity, and it was more about an emotional captivity. And so that's why I use the term trauma bond instead of Stockholm syndrome. But if you feel comfortable with Stockholm syndrome, then that's totally fine. For some people, I imagine it might help you understand the trauma bond a little bit better. Because if you do understand Stockholm syndrome and what happens there, then you also understand the trauma bond. Now, as I've explained many facets of the trauma bond, you might still have some questions like, how does this work? Why does this work? And really the key to understanding it is to understand the intermittent reinforcement. So somebody who is emotionally abusive is usually just not going to be 100% abusive all the time. There is usually some intermittent reinforcement. And depending on the person, depending on the relationship, it may be very little or it may be a lot. Nonetheless, both are present. There is the abusive nature of it. There is the put down. This person makes you feel less than. They make you feel unworthy of love. And then they turn it around. They may even apologize and they make you feel good. So what happens is that your self-worth and your self-esteem gets attached to this person, to their praise or to their put-downs. So however they see you is kind of how you start to see yourself. And what's really dangerous about that is that you lose your sense of self. You lose your own identity. And you may get to a point where you feel like you need that person's approval in order to feel good about yourself. And that is such a dangerous place to be. We should all feel whole and happy on our own without that external validation. But that's easier said than done, isn't it? So I have a video on how to break the trauma bond, and please believe me when I say it is not as easy as watching a video, but this video I hope could be a good first step. So I'm gonna link to that. And if you feel like you've left this person and the after effects are really just too much, they're interfering with your ability to live your life, then it's probably a good time to talk to somebody, talk to a professional about what you're going through. There is no shame in it, and it could really help you process some of the things that have happened. So if you found this video helpful, please let me know by hitting that like button. And if you'd like to see more like it, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.